May God bless your day and your entire upcoming week. Welcome to our latest deep dive.
Thank you. It's really great to be here for this one.
Today we are immersing ourselves in one of the most intense, gripping narratives from the ancient world. We're looking at Genesis chapter 31.
Right. And we're drawing our analysis from the extensive historical and theological notes found in the Holman and the NAA Study Bibles.
Which are fantastic resources. Our mission today is to unpack a really fascinating 4,000-year-old family drama.
It's got a bit of everything.
Oh, totally. We're looking at massive accumulations of wealth, a covert midnight escape across the Euphrates.
Stolen household gods.
Yes. And an incredibly tense border standoff.
It's a text that operates on so many multiple levels. I mean, underneath the narrative action, it's this profound study of ancient jurisprudence and economic exploitation.
And shifting spiritual paradigms.
Right.
We want to discover what this dispute reveals to you, the listener, about fairness, faith, and the psychological weight of finally drawing hard boundaries in your life.
Because the transition of power is, well, it's rarely clean.
Exactly. If you've ever had to navigate a toxic environment or maybe untangle yourself from a family business that's soured, the themes here are going to resonate deeply with you.
It really is a remarkable story of emancipation.
It plays out like a modern-day corporate thriller, complete with embezzlement accusations, non-compete clauses, and a brilliant ancient ruse involving a camel saddle.
The camel saddle is definitely the twist of the century.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to set the stage with the breaking point. Jacob has been managing his father-in-law Laban's enterprise for 20 years.
20 years of really hard labor.
And the environment has just become completely untenable. Jacob has been immensely successful in breeding the flocks, so Laban's sons are openly complaining that Jacob has basically siphoned off their father's wealth.
They're threatened by his success.
Right. And Jacob notices that Laban's own face is no longer favorable toward him. The relational warmth is just gone.
That physical description of Laban's face changing that carries significant weight in ancient Near Eastern literature.
How so?
Well, the study notes highlight that the shining face of patriarch indicated favor, economic protection, and blessing.
Like the Aaronic blessing later on. The Lord make his face shine upon you.
Precisely. But conversely, a darkened or fallen face meant you were actively in danger. You had lost your legal and social covering.
Wow. So Jacob knows he's on thin ice.
Laban and his sons are reacting to a massive shift in the economic power dynamic. But the ultimate catalyst for the departure isn't just workplace tension.
Right. God explicitly commands Jacob to return to the land of his ancestors.
Back to Canaan, and God provides the guarantee, saying, I will be with you.
So with that divine directive, Jacob holds this covert meeting with his wives, Rachel and Leah, out in the field, away from the household's listening ears.
Which is smart, given the paranoia back at the camp.
Yeah. He lays out his legal and moral case. He emphasizes that he has worked with all his physical strength, but Laban has continuously mocked him, cheated him, and changed his wages 10 times.
And the response from Rachel and Leah to this grievance is just staggering when you consider the patriarchal structure of their society.
They don't take their dad's side at all.
Not at all. The Holman and NASB study notes point out the depth of their alienation here. They don't feel torn between their husband and their father. They feel profoundly betrayed by Laban.
They state really clearly that he treated them like strangers.
Yes, they say he sold them and consumed her money.
It's a brutal, unvarnished assessment of their own father. They're essentially saying he liquidated them as assets,
instead of cherishing them as daughters. And that touches on the specific economic reality of the ancient dowry, the mohar.
Okay, break that down for us.
In their cultural context, the wealth Laban gained from Jacob's 14 years of labor should have been held in trust. A portion of that bride price was meant to function as a safety net.
For the daughters.
Right, an inheritance to ensure their financial security if they were ever widowed. But instead, Laban treated the transaction purely as a profit center for himself.
She just consumed their financial future.
Exactly. So when Rachel and Leah see God transferring the wealth of the flocks from Laban back to Jacob, they do not view it as theft.
They view it as cosmic justice.
Yes. They tell Jacob to do whatever God has commanded.
So the family is entirely unified, and the departure begins. But it is a stealthy, high-anxiety exit. Jacob waits until Laban is 3 days away shearing his sheep.
Sheep shearing was a major agricultural festival.
The land would be heavily occupied and very distracted.
For perfect timing.
So Jacob packs up his massive, slow-moving caravan, his family, the flocks, all his wealth, and he crosses the Euphrates River, heading south toward the hill country of Gilead.
But here the narrative introduces a crucial, complicating variable.
The ultimate wild card.
Right. On the way out, Rachel secretly steals Laban's household idols, the teraphim,
And she keeps Jacob completely in the dark about this.
which sets the stage for a massive, potentially deadly confrontation.
Because Laban doesn't even realize they're gone until 3 days later. You can imagine the absolute fury when he returns to an empty camp.
Oh, he's enraged. He gathers his relatives, effectively forming a militia, and initiates a grueling 7-day pursuit.
He finally corners Jacob's caravan at Mount Gilead. And the tension is palpable, because Laban clearly has the superior manpower to take everything back by force.
It is a terrifying tactical disadvantage for Jacob.
But God intervenes.
Yes. The night before Laban reaches the camp, God appears to Laban the Aramean in a dream, and the warning delivered is incredibly strict.
God tells him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. That phrasing always stands out to me. Good or bad.
The NASB notes clarify that this is a specific Hebrew idiom. It doesn't mean Laban is literally forbidden from opening his mouth to speak to Jacob.
Right, because they obviously have a conversation the next day.
It functions as a strict legal gag order. In ancient Near Eastern legal terminology, speaking good or bad meant taking matters into your own hands to alter the current state of affairs.
So God is effectively putting a divine restraining order on Laban.
Forbidding him from passing judgment, imposing a new contract, or harming Jacob in any way, the matter has been taken out of Laban's jurisdiction entirely.
That is so powerful. Laban still initiates the confrontation the next morning, though, and he attempts to heavily spin the narrative.
He really does. He accuses Jacob of sneaking away and carrying his daughters off like prisoners of war taken by the sword.
He plays the aggrieved patriarch perfectly. He laments that Jacob denied him the chance to kiss his grandchildren goodbye or throw a proper musical send-off.
With tambourines and harps. The hypocrisy is palpable, considering Rachel and Leah's earlier testimony that he treated them like foreign property.
Laban is attempting to regain control of the narrative in front of his militia. But when the emotional manipulation fails to yield results, he drops the ultimate accusation.
He demands to know why Jacob stole his gods.
What's fascinating here is the true nature of these teraphim. The study Bibles provide essential historical context that shifts how we understand this theft.
Right, these were not just religious statues used for daily prayers.
Right.
Archaeological discoveries, particularly the Nutsi tablets, shed light on the multi-layered function of these idols. Possessing the family teraphim often implied a legitimate legal claim to the family inheritance.
Whoever held the gods held the power to claim the estate.
Exactly. And because Laban now had biological sons of his own, Rachel's theft of the teraphim might have been a calculated move to secure a portion of the inheritance she felt was rightfully hers.
Or, the notes also suggest they were used for superstitious divination. Laban might have used them to consult the spirits to track Jacob's movements.
So Rachel was effectively trying to blind his spiritual radar.
That makes so much sense. But because Jacob is completely innocent and unaware of Rachel's actions, his defense is incredibly reckless.
He invites Laban to search the entire camp.
He declares that whoever is found with the gods shall not live, unwittingly pronouncing a death sentence on his own wife.
It creates a moment of masterclass dramatic irony. Laban aggressively searches Jacob's tent, Leah's tent, the tents of the two maidservants, finding absolutely nothing.
The tension peaks as he finally enters Rachel's tent, and Rachel executes this brilliant and tense deception.
She takes the teraphim, stuffs them inside her camel saddle, and simply sits on them.
Right inside the tent. When Laban enters, she weaponizes the cultural taboos of the era perfectly.
She apologizes to her father, asking him not to be angry that she cannot rise, claiming that the way of women is upon her.
And Laban, respecting the strict purity laws of the time, does not force her to stand. He searches around her but ultimately finds nothing.
The Holman study notes point out the profound theological mockery happening in this scene.
The biblical author is intentionally dismantling Laban's entire belief system here.
The layers of irony are devastating to the concept of idolatry. I mean, these are supposed to be Laban's powerful deities, the protectors of his estate.
Yet they're easily stolen.
They are shoved into a sweaty piece of luggage. They require a human being to physically hide them to keep them safe.
And connecting this to the purity laws we see codified later in texts like Leviticus 15, Rachel's claimed condition would render anything she sat upon ceremonially unclean.
Laban's supposedly mighty gods are trapped in the dark, completely impotent and rendered impure.
It creates a stark contrast between these useless household idols and the living God who just actively intervened in Laban's dream to protect Jacob.
The juxtaposition is the entire point. Laban's gods are powerless, physical objects of human manipulation, while Jacob's God dictates the terms of reality and stops a hostile militia dead in its tracks.
So when Laban comes up empty-handed, the dam finally breaks. Have you ever held your tongue for years only to finally let someone have it? That's what Jacob does here.
He unleashes a 20-year grievance that he has clearly been harboring.
He explodes. He demands that Laban publicly display his transgression. He challenges Laban to take any stolen item he found and set it in front of all their relatives so they can judge the matter right then and there.
And Laban's silence in response speaks volumes.
He has nothing.
Having thoroughly lost the moral high ground, he has to stand there and listen as Jacob details the brutal reality of his 2 decades of service.
14 years to secure his marriages and 6 years for the flock. Jacob describes the intense physical toll of pastoral life.
The consuming, dehydrating heat of the sun by day, the freezing frost by night, and sleep completely fleeing from his eyes.
And the cultural context regarding ancient Near East shepherding contracts is vital here. Jacob wasn't just working hard. He was subjected to predatory legal terms.
When you look at comparative literature from the period, specifically the Code of Hammurabi, the magnitude of Laban's exploitation becomes quantifiable.
How so?
Standard ancient law actually protected hired shepherds. It built in provisions for acts of nature.
Okay.
If a wild animal attacked the flock and tore a sheep to pieces, or if disease struck, the owner of the flock absorbed that loss. It was considered an occupational hazard beyond the shepherd's control.
But Jacob states clearly that he was forced to bear that loss entirely on his own.
He says, "I did not bring you the animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. You demanded it of me, whether stolen by day or stolen by night."
Laban had forced Jacob into a strict unfair liability contract.
For 20 years, Jacob was paying out of his own pocket for every single missing or killed animal, absorbing venture capitalist levels of risk on a shepherd's wages.
Jacob makes it explicitly clear how he survived this economic exploitation. He declares that if the God of his father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with him, Laban would have sent him away completely empty-handed.
But God saw his affliction and the labor of his hands and intervened.
That specific title, the fear of Isaac.
Pachad Yitzchak in the Hebrew.
Right. It's striking. The study notes delve into the theological weight of this phrase. It is a deeply reverential title that appears only here.
It speaks to a transcendent God who induces profound awe and trembling. It implies a God whose sheer presence and moral authority command absolute respect.
Which again serves as the ultimate contrast to Laban's localized, easily stolen gods currently hidden under a camel saddle.
It really highlights the spiritual chasm between the two men. Laban is frantically searching for physical totems to secure his power,
while Jacob is shielded by the fear of Isaac, a God who transcends geography and actively guards the vulnerable from exploitation.
So faced with the reality that he cannot win legally, ethically, or spiritually, Laban pivots.
He realizes his absolute defeat and attempts to save face by proposing a covenant.
He suggests they make a treaty to serve as a witness between them. He's attempting to reframe himself as a benevolent patriarch, securing a non-aggression pact for the sake of his daughters and grandchildren.
So they proceed to establish a physical boundary. They gather stones to create a heap and set up a pillar.
And the text highlights a fascinating cultural and linguistic split that occurs during this monument building.
Laban names the heap in his native Aramaic language, Jigar Sahaduta.
Jacob, however, names it in Hebrew, Gilead.
The terms translate to the exact same concept, heap of witness.
While the meaning is identical, the use of two different languages signifies a definitive historical break.
Up until this point, the family lines were intertwined.
But now, the biblical narrative is officially separating them into two distinct peoples, with different linguistic markers and different cultural destinies. The physical boundary of the stones represents a permanent cultural boundary.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because there's a third name given to this location, Mizpah,
which translates to watchtower.
If you are familiar with modern sentimental traditions, you have likely heard of the Mizpah blessing. People quote the verse, "May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another."
It's often engraved on jewelry shared between close friends.
Right, as a sweet reminder of connection across distance.
The study Bibles forcefully correct that romanticized modern misconception.
It wasn't sweet at all.
Not even a little. In its original historical context, Mizpah was not a sentimental blessing of continued fellowship. It was a mutual threat.
A threat overseen by the divine.
Precisely. It was a strict militarized boundary marker. Laban's actual intent behind the phrase is one of profound distrust.
He's essentially saying, I do not trust you, and you do not trust me.
Therefore, may God act as the cosmic watchman. May God keep a vigilant eye on you so that you do not cross this line to attack me when I am not looking, and I will not cross it to attack you.
It is the establishment of an ancient demilitarized zone.
Because they can no longer police each other physically, they are calling upon the divine to enforce a non-aggression pact.
Following the establishment of this tense boundary, the narrative moves toward resolution. Jacob swears his oath by the fear of Isaac. He offers a sacrifice on the mountain and invites all the relatives to share a meal.
Sharing a meal was standard ancient Near Eastern treaty practice. You solidify a covenant and formally end hostilities by breaking bread together.
It is the diplomatic seal on the newly drawn border. Early the next morning, Laban rises, kisses his grandchildren and his daughters, pronounces a blessing over them, and departs.
He returns to his home in Aram.
And Jacob continues his journey back to Canaan. The 20-year saga of exploitation and entanglement is officially over. The boundary holds.
The resolution is comprehensive. The physical and geographical separation is finally matched by a complete relational and spiritual separation.
The two camps will no longer overlap. As we synthesize the insights from this deep dive, consider the implications for how you navigate your own life. We all encounter situations or relationships that drain our resources and demand far more than they contribute.
It's just the reality of human relationships sometimes.
So consider how you handle your own Mizpah moments. When navigating toxic dynamics or entrenched unfairness, where do you need to establish firm, undeniable boundaries to protect your peace and ensure your forward progress?
Because sometimes the most spiritually mature action is building a monument that clearly defines what you will no longer tolerate.
That leads to a lingering question from the text that I know you wanted to leave the listener to ponder.
I do. We analyzed Rachel's theft of the teraphim today. Even though she fully agreed that the God of Jacob was providing for them and she was eager to escape her father's oppressive economic control, she still felt compelled to secretly pack those pagan statues.
She couldn't leave them behind.
Why is it that even when we are boldly stepping into a liberating brand new chapter of our lives, we often find ourselves secretly holding on to the idols, the old coping mechanisms, and the superstitions of our past? What are the old comforts we hide in our luggage when we're supposed to be walking in freedom?
Examining our own hidden baggage as we cross our borders is a profound thought to take with you this week. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the complexities of Genesis 31. May God bless all of you listeners.